Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness practice, and we hear their stories and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. And I'm really happy to introduce today's expert, Tiffany King. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you, Lucia.
Tiffany is a Christian health coach, and she focuses on food addiction, neuroscience, metabolic health, functional medicine, and the spiritual component of health. She graduated from the University of Colorado in Denver with a BS in psychology and communications and an interest in neuroscience. She got her functional medicine health coaching certification from the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. And most importantly, she gave her life to Christ in August of 2022. And now she's on a kingdom mission to bring Christians closer to God through the pursuit of health. And I just really love that mission that you have. And so I am glad that we get to talk a little bit today about food addictions and how they impact our health. But tell us, how did you get started with your interest in health and lifestyle?
So, one of my earliest memories was me sneaking cookies at 7 years old. And so as I've gone over the course of my life, I have wondered to myself, what prompted me to be in the kitchen sneaking cookies at such an early age? Why was I sneaking cookies? Would I have been sneaking broccoli and steak? Right? Probably not. But and then it went on, and I had some rejection early on in my life. And when the food wasn't strong enough to mask those feelings of emotional hurt, I then turned to substances. And so from 14 to about 35 years old, it was just down this path of one substance to another, just as coping mechanisms, as something to take away that sting of that emotional pain that I wasn't really able to deal with. And so, everything from sex and porn and cigarettes and pills and powders, energy drinks, gambling, sugar, processed foods, all of it trying to feel better, just to feel
Mhm.
better, right? Because I didn't have a coping mechanism around those things. And like I said, it started as early as 7. So, I finally got sober off of all the drugs at 35, but in doing that, that kind of thrust me back into the food realm where I was now just eating, eating, eating. Like on my third day of sobriety, I ate 3 boxes of Girl Scout cookies, like not one, not two cookies, 3 boxes. And I
Yeah,
knew at
yeah.
that point I had a problem. But I thought in my mind at the time it was better than going back to drugs, right? And so
Mhm.
I redeveloped this really negative relationship with food, just trying to feel better. So that was kind of how, so over the course of my life, I've always lacked self-regulation mechanisms, right? Ways to just cope with life without turning to a cheap dopamine hit. And what I realized is that all addictions really are the same. It's just lacking that coping mechanism.
I think that's really true. And I love that you brought out that the real fundamental issue there was emotional. It was trying to
Mhm.
deal with pain, with trauma. And I think that's what drives many people into this addiction cycle. And you really experienced how you could go easily from one to another. Like when you got
Mhm.
sober, like no alcohol, no drugs, I'm taking it at that point, but then it was food.
Mhm.
And it's still about trying to numb the pain.
Mhm.
So, how did you solve the pain problem? How did you experience healing there?
Well, so truly, like I said, I gave my life to Christ 3 years ago.
Mm,
And prior to giving my life to Christ, I didn't see a huge issue with the way that I was eating. But
mhm,
another big part of my story is I fell bedridden ill with multiple autoimmune issues. So during
mm,
that time, I had to really change the way that I was eating pretty much overnight, but I would still binge when I could get away with it, right? And it wasn't really until I gave my life to Christ that he started convicting me, and I started
mm,
to just being really introduced to this concept of turning to food instead of God for comfort and peace. So it was like food idolatry in another sense.
mhm,
And so the way that I dealt with that, is leaning closer into Christ, right? And just really understanding that food is never the solution to emotional turmoil. It's not the solution to stress. It's not the solution to loneliness. It's not the solution to any of these things that we turn to food for. And so we have to find that solution where there is actually where it actually is a solution, not just a piece of duct tape for our issues.
Yeah. So true, so true. So for you, what did it look like to stop using food to numb, to provide comfort? Like where did you go? Like what did it really look like to get comfort somewhere else? Like through your spiritual life or whatever you were using. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, and it doesn't matter what addiction you're coming out of. Initially, when you start doing it, it's very uncomfortable. It
Mhm.
is very uncomfortable. And the thing that's really prevalent in culture today is people's inability to sit through discomfort or uncomfortable situations. So
Mm,
we are always turning really quickly to numb it, to make it go away with whatever substance we're grabbing for. And so learning to sit just with God through that discomfort, and it was really uncomfortable at first, not turning to food, when that
yeah.
was something that became just such a strong coping mechanism for so long. And recovery from a food addiction isn't going to look the same for everybody. So I really started incorporating the gym and then started, going to Bible study and a church community group and walking my dog and reading my Bible, prayer, just
Mhm.
other coping mechanisms. But it didn't happen all overnight. Like it was a very intentional, slow process to change one behavior at a time.
Yeah. And how long would you say it took you to really feel like you were experiencing freedom from all of these addictions? Or is
I
it
think
a struggle? You can be honest, it's okay.
I think that because we need food to live, it's always going to be some type of a battle. Like, I don't think that we're ever fully delivered from those behaviors. And I think that we always kind of have to be on guard, because it's not like a substance that we can just not use anymore and abstain from. We actually need food. So it's a very intentional behavior that needs practiced every day. Um, and remind me that question one more time.
No, you're answering it really well. We're talking about like as you changed your relationship with food instead of
Mhm.
using it as a crutch or a numbing agent. Um, did it take a long time to feel like you were no longer enslaved to the food? Was it something that happened in one day, one week, one month? Like for you, what was your experience?
So, like I said, I am still to this day learning. Like, I'm not
Hmm.
sure that true 100% deliverance for the rest of life can ever happen, right? Because we still are exposed to these substances, right? Like you can stay away from a crack house and the smell of crack pretty easily, but when you drive down the road and you smell donuts being cooked at Dunkin' Donuts, that's going to set off those neurotransmitter pathways, right? To induce those cues, those craving cues. So we're always going to be exposed to food cues for the rest of our lives.
Mm,
And so I think that like I said, it's going to be a daily battle and it didn't go away right away. And I still learn valuable lessons. Like I'm visiting a friend and we went out last night and there was something on the menu that I normally wouldn't eat. I thought it was meatloaf. It would be just fine. But now that I'm so far away from those toxic foods, I felt it in my system, right?
mm,
But again, I was like, oh, I want to be able to have this food with my friend out at this restaurant. And then just realizing it probably wasn't the best choice for me. And not that it sent me back to a binge or anything, but
right.
again, it's just the ingredients that don't make you feel good after a while. So I'm still learning, and I will always probably be learning and adapting to what works in my current,
Hmm.
um, phase of life that I'm in. So it's a continued learning process.
I love that mindset that it's like we don't just arrive. It's like we're
Right.
always in a process of growth and learning and experiences. Even like you said, you made a choice last night that didn't end up making you feel as good as you thought.
Mhm.
And so it's like you get to learn from that. It's not like you're chalking it up, oh, it's another failure. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at a learning
Mhm.
opportunity.
Mhm.
And and I really like the way you approach that because I think we all can do that with whatever it is we're dealing with.
Mhm.
When we have blood sugar issues like prediabetes or diabetes, there are often that we have to make the choice to lean into, to do things differently than we've maybe done them for many, many years. Many of the people I'm working with are, older than you, which means they had the bad habits for even longer. And yet, it's so amazing to see how God has the ability to help heal our minds. And
Mhm.
we actually have that ability to make new habits and choose new behaviors, even
Mhm.
when we have really long ingrained patterns,
Mhm. Yeah.
and so I really love the that voice of hope that you bring because
Mhm.
you've really a lot and you have dealt with addiction in multiple ways. Now, somebody that's listening might be asking the question, well, how do I know if I'm a food addict? Because we're focusing a little bit on food today, but there's a lot of similarities between any kind of addiction that someone may have. But if we're talking about food addiction, how would you help someone to understand whether or not they're actually a food addict?
So there is quite a few different quizzes online. One of the ones that I personally like to go to is the 𝗙𝗘𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗏 page. And
Hmm.
right on their main page, they have a questionnaire that asks, Am I a food addict? And I've presented this quiz to a couple of my clients, and they really did not realize that they were treating foods in these ways until they went through the quiz. So just a few of the questions, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah. So, have you ever wanted to stop eating and found you just couldn't? Do you constantly think about food or your weight? Do you find yourself attempting one diet or food plan after another with no lasting success? Do you binge and then get rid of the binge through vomiting, exercise laxatives, or other forms of purging? Do you eat differently in private that you do than you do in front of other people? So there's about, let's see, 20 questions on here, but those
Oh,
types of
wow.
questions really prompt us to ask ourselves, am I participating in these behaviors?
I love that. That's a great resource. Foodaddicts.org.
.org. And then Yale also has a scale that they use, so they could just look up the Yale Food Addict Quiz, and they have like a version as well on there.
Okay, yes, I was acquainted with that one, but I
Mm.
hadn't heard that other resource of foodaddict.org. So those are
Yeah.
awesome resources, and I love that. Now, with your experience of multiple addictions over the years, what would you say are some of the similarities and differences between food addiction and other addictions like cigarettes, drugs, gambling, other addictive behaviors? I know you kind of referenced it briefly a little bit ago, but let's kind of dive into it a little bit more. Similarities and differences
Mm.
between food
Mhm.
addiction and these other addictions.
Okay, well, this is just going to be like a list of a list here. So, obsessing, hiding, planning, shameful, obsessed, a one-track mind, negative consequences, but still partaking in the activity. It's a very, very self-absorbed thing, addiction is. It robs us of joy and peace. It's harmful, yet we still do it. We can't imagine life without it. We go through withdrawal symptoms. Our finances often revolve around it. And then if you do think about quitting, you're so far in the weeds, you don't know how to get out. So it feels you feel helpless and it feels impossible. So you don't know what to do and you throw up your hands and you go back to using. So those are some of the similarities.
Okay, yes. And that makes sense. And we see that across all of these different behaviors. What's different about food?
That you can't abstain from it.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes, and that's a big one because like you say, you can draw these like bright lines on these other addictions. No, I'm not going to have it in the house. I'm going to stay away from the store area that sells it. I'll stay away from my friends that use it. But we can't do that with food, can we?
Yeah, nope. Not for very long anyway.
No, that's right. And so it is a very challenging, I think, for many people because of that, because it really is where we need to experience the fruit of the spirit of self-control in our lives, because we can't just eliminate it, but we need God's help to give us that self-control in the way we relate to food. What are some of the key takeaways that people can use starting today to help conquer food addiction?
Mhm. Well, I think it's important first and foremost for people to realize that they are not broken. It's not just them that has a problem. There's nothing wrong with them, right? So the food industry has hijacked our brains. And so it wasn't until industrial food came about, probably about 75 years ago, where people weren't farming and getting fresh foods from the markets. They started making these packaged industrialized foods and understanding the bliss point of those manufactured foods. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Dorito Effect book, but they really talk about these scientists in a lab creating the bliss point is what they call it. And they pay these scientists very well to create the bliss point of food where it's the perfect amount of sugar, fat, salt, carbs, whatever the combination is. And they'll watch people's brain light up on a brain scan, and wherever they see the most activity on that brain scan is where they will dial in those ingredients so that they keep you hooked and wanting more. So just understanding that you're not weak, there's nothing wrong with you. It's really just the food industry has gotten a hold of our reward pathways in our brains. And so something that really can be done is to just make sure that we're eating whole foods that are not creating those high dopamine activities in our brain that are leaving us wanting more.
That's really amazing. I don't know if we really realize how much science and science of the brain and how it works is behind the formulation of refined and highly processed foods. So when we, walk into a grocery store and we're walking down the aisle and there's all these boxes and cans and bags of food that has been very carefully designed to make you not be able to eat just one. Like that's not just a little jingle for potato chips. It's actually a thing that companies pay a great deal of money for. And that's to have the flavor profile designed in a way that brings you back for more and more. And interestingly enough, I like you mentioned what three of those main flavor agents are. They're not the only ones, but the really primary ones are sugar, salt, and fat.
Mhm.
And then often in combination with refined carbohydrates, and then you get all your chips and your cookies and, baked goods and all that sort of thing. And and so this really isn't food in its whole or natural form. And so it works in our bodies and especially in our brains in such a different way. What are some of the other aspects that come to your mind of how, our brain is involved in this whole addiction cycle? What are some of the
Mm.
mechanisms?
Well, so I found it interesting that we have three different types of hunger. So the first type of hunger is a homeostatic hunger, and that's really when we are hungry and our body does need nutrients and we do need fuel. The second type of hunger is stress eating or emotional eating, and that is where our body we get stressed. We feel that cortisol rush from the stress, and our evolutionary mechanisms tell us go get carbs and sugar fast because you got to fight something stressful. So that's the second type of hunger, and often when people get stressed, that's when they want to eat the donuts
Mhm.
or the high carb item or whatever it is, right? The sugary coffee drink. And then the third type of hunger is a hedonistic hunger. And that's the one that they get us with. The hedonistic hunger is basically interested in novelty and flavor of foods. So when you see Pepsi coming out with a new flavor, or you see Doritos got a new flavor of chips, or your favorite cereal company's got a new flavor you've never tried, And so that hedonistic hunger, pleasure-seeking hunger wants to try that new thing. And so interestingly, I feel like if we ask ourselves those questions, like what hunger am I feeding? Is this biological hunger or is it one of the other two? Um, yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, those are great questions to ask. And it
Mm,
reminded me, I was just in the store the other day and I saw like this whole line of new flavors. And a lot of these newer flavors that are coming out are very spicy. So it's
mm,
like that's being added to the sugar, salt, fat thing is
mm,
now the spice. And
mm,
so like chips with extra spice or curry or and I mean and some really like flavor combinations that haven't been like standard American fare, as I was like growing up or whatever, but we're starting to really see a lot of that. And the stuff is flying off the shelves. Like people really, really like them, right? And and so I find that that's kind of an interesting kind of fourth flavor, you might say, that is starting to be used is the whole spice thing. And I'm wondering if it's not even like I believe that it might even be the chemistry of numbing physically our mouths to pain. Because
mm,
I was doing some research on how do spices work, like hot spices like chili and really hot
mm.
peppers.
Yeah.
And there's actually an enzyme that our body can secrete um, that transmits pain signals to our brain.
Mm,
And when we use like these hot peppers, it uses up our supply of those things. And that's why like people get used to spice, right? And it can get to where it doesn't feel hot to them at all. And somebody else is just going, right?
mm,
And it has to do with the levels of this enzyme. And when you use up that enzyme, you no longer have the pain signal being transmitted the same way, which is why they use like pain patches that have capsaicin in them, which is the hot from pepper. And it actually works for pain, like when you put patches on like a sore joint or something, because it depletes this chemical that transmits pain signals. And so
mm,
once it's gone, it's like you don't get pain signals to your brain anymore. And so, we were talking about how many of these addictive foods are numbing
mm.
emotions. And now it's like we're actually seeing these foods that numb not only emotions, but actually provide some like physical numbing, which is really interesting to me.
That is interesting. I had not actually heard that yet.
Yeah, so there's just so many things to learn, and I love that you're working from a foundation of psychology and how the brain works, because I
Mm,
really believe that the more we understand our brains, the the better we are, the better our toolkit, I might say, for strategies when we want to experience change or transformation in our lives.
mm.
And I love that you have a free gift for our audience today. 10 tips to conquer food addiction with neuroscience. Do you want to tell them just a little bit about what they're going to get when they click on that link?
Yeah. So just some basics about how to pair your food or how to not pair your food, taking time during when you're eating, just a lot of things will cause us to overeat. And kind of like going back to, so the quicker something hits our blood sugar, our bloodstream, the more addictive it is and the more
Mm.
conditioned our behavior is with that certain food. So if we can just it talks about a little bit about blood sugar and how we can just choose foods that aren't lighting up those pathways in our brains, and just a few other tips just to really understand the brain, so that we can pick foods that are not causing these behaviors, and so that we can actually just get over that hurdle that prevents us um, from conquering food addictions. So,
I love that. And I think that'd be a very useful tool to have handy. So
mhm,
feel free to go down into the description below wherever you're watching this video. And in the description, you'll see a link to Tiffany's free gift. And so just give it a click. It'll give you a nice free resource to help you conquer food addictions and understand kind of how that works with your brain. Now, based on your experience working with people that are dealing with food addictions, Tiffany, tell me what are some of the most valuable things that you think people need to know as they walk away from our time together and our conversation together today? What kind of words of wisdom might you want to share with them?
Man, so there's just that they're not alone, really.
Mm,
I just heard a stat the other day that 75% of our healthcare dollars are spent on metabolic disease. And if we think about that, most of metabolic disease probably stems from some type of behavior around food. So people think that they're by themselves and they're struggling and they're the only ones that can't stop eating cookies. It's not just you. I remember when I got sober, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and eat a whole pan of brownies. It was crazy. Um, but that they're not alone, that there is help, and that essentially you're not gonna build Rome overnight. So coming
mhm.
out of food addiction, just like any other addiction, it's behavior by behavior, step by step. So one of the most powerful things you could do is start with your breakfast. Don't turn to the donuts, the pastries, the muffins, the waffles, the syrups, the fruit juice, none of that. Let's start with a savory breakfast with some fat in it, so
Mm.
protein and fat, and start your day off right with that so you don't have energy crashes on a blood roller coaster for most of the day. Solidify that behavior, and then you can move on to other small behaviors until one by one you knock them all out.
I love that. I think that's a great tip. I think breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and it is a great way to start your day and get your blood sugar levels where they need to be.
Mhm.
And as we do that, it really does help to prevent those crashes that bring us into that situation where we just want to eat like the whole bag of cookies. So, great advice. Really appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today, Tiffany, and for bringing us the encouragement that you have that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And as you're listening today, I want you to remember health is wealth, and it comes by choice, not by chance. So thank you for being here with us today.
Mm. Bless you. Thank you so much for having me.